The gunshot cracked through the glass like a thunderclap. Ethan Cole felt the bullet rip past his shoulder and bury itself in the stainless steel fridge behind him. The diner lights flickered ketchup bottles rattling on the counter. Outside, the blizzard howled, turning the Oklahoma Turnpike into a white wall. Inside, 3 men in dark coats pushed through the shattered front door snow at their heels, pistols raised. "Get the kid and the woman!" Now one of them shouted. In the far booth, his 8-year-old son Leo slid under the table, eyes wide, clutching his little backpack. Beside him, the woman in the gray blazer, who 2 hours earlier had just been another tired customer in need of coffee, was frozen in place, her campaign button glinting under the neon. Ethan's left hand tightened around the cast iron skillet he'd been cooking with. His right pressed against the warm blood soaking through his shirt. He could feel his heart pounding, that old buried part of him snapping awake like it had just been waiting for the call. They thought he was just the night cook in a nowhere truck stop diner, and they were about to find out how wrong they were. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight and hit that like and subscribe button if you believe courage still matters in this world. Most nights, Ethan Cole smelled like bacon grease and cheap coffee by sunrise. At 37, he worked the graveyard shift at a worn-out 24-hour diner just off I-44, a place truckers called the Lantern because its faded sign buzzed and flickered like an old porch light. He flipped pancakes, scrubbed grills, and wiped down sticky booths in the quiet hours when the world felt half asleep. When the cooks went home, and the managers clocked out, Ethan stayed. He wasn't there for the tips or the glory. There weren't any. He was there because it was the only job he could find that let him keep his son close. Leo usually did homework in the last booth by the jukebox earbuds, in coloring books spread out beside half-finished chocolate milkshakes. On school nights, Ethan's neighbor would pick him up around 10. On weekends when money was tight, and babysitters were a luxury, Leo would curl up on the vinyl seat and fall asleep to the hum of refrigerators and the hiss of the coffee maker. Ethan would glance over every few minutes just to make sure his chest was still rising and falling. 10 years before, Ethan had worn a different kind of uniform. He'd been Air Force pararescue, the guy they dropped into places other people were trying desperately to get out of. He'd hauled bleeding soldiers onto helicopters, pulled civilians from collapsed buildings, and done things in dust-colored countries he never talked about. Then one day, a doctor in a Tulsa hospital said the words brain aneurysm, and we did everything we could, and the war movies in his head didn't seem so loud anymore. His wife Jenna was gone, and all that remained was a 3-day-old boy who wrapped his tiny hand around Ethan's finger and rewired his entire universe. So Ethan hung up his flight suit. He stopped answering calls from old teammates. He took whatever work he could, warehouse shifts, unloading trucks, and finally that lonely overnight cook job off the interstate. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and Leo always knew where to find his dad. Ethan kept his past locked down tight. To the regulars, he was just Cole, the quiet guy, who could fry an egg perfectly every time. To Leo, he was Dad, the man who patched scraped knees with the same careful hands that once stitched up strangers in the back of helicopters. He didn't want his son to know about firefights or medevac birds, or the way fear smells when it's packed into a Black Hawk. He wanted him to know about spelling tests and Little League, and the way the sky looks on a clear Oklahoma evening. For a long time, that was enough. Then, the black SUV started showing up. At first, Ethan barely noticed it, a dark vehicle idling by the far pumps, around 3 in the morning, always with the engine running, always facing the diner windows. No one came in to buy gas. No one came in for coffee. They just sat there. One night, as he was refilling salt shakers, he spotted a flicker of light through the glass, A phone screen raised pointed straight at the booth where Leo was coloring. The next weekend, that same SUV appeared again, this time on the night a candidate for state attorney general stopped in with her driver to grab a quick bite on the campaign trail, her face already plastered on billboards along the highway. Ethan watched as the SUV's headlights blinked twice. The men inside didn't order food. They watched the boy. They watched the woman in the gray blazer, and for the first time since he'd buried his uniform in the back of a closet, Ethan felt that old familiar chill run through his veins. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And whatever it was, it had just rolled right up to his front door. Ethan didn't say a word to Leo about the SUV, or the phone pointed at their booth, or the cold ripple that had moved through his gut like a warning he hadn't felt in years. Kids didn't need fear. They needed sleep. Warm pancakes, and someone who showed up when they said they would. But the next afternoon, trouble came looking for him anyway. It started when the new district shift manager, a guy named Calvin Pierce, marched into the Lantern like he owned it. Tall, polished mid-30s with a company badge that he flashed around like it came with handcuffs. Ethan had seen the type before, too important for the room, too loud for the space, convinced the world ran smoother when people like him barked orders. Calvin walked straight up to the counter where Ethan was chopping onions and said, "We need to talk about your situation." Ethan didn't stop chopping. "What situation?" That kid sleeping in booth 7? Leo, who was reading a book and kicking his feet under the table, looked up at the sound of the manager's voice, his expression tightening. Ethan wiped his hands on a towel and kept his tone calm. "It's Saturday. He stays with me on weekends." Calvin exaggerated a sigh. "This isn't a daycare, Cole. Customers have complained." Ethan knew that was a lie. Truckers loved Leo. Half of them brought him baseball cards or snacks. But Calvin wasn't speaking for customers. He was speaking for himself. "He stays quiet," Ethan said. "He's not bothering anyone." "He's bothering me," Calvin snapped. "And he makes this place look unprofessional. People think we hire charity cases who bring their personal problems to work." Leo shrank into his seat. Ethan saw it, the small curl of his son's shoulders, the way he tucked his hands under the table, the way a kid tries to fold himself up so he doesn't take up space. It hit Ethan harder than the gunshot that grazed him the night before. He kept his voice steady. "He'll stay until my neighbor gets off work." "You know that." Calvin smirked. "Well, things change. The district office is pushing new standards. And you?" He tapped Ethan's blood-stained shirt. "You come in with ripped clothes and excuses about kitchen accidents. It's not a good look." Ethan had stitched that bullet graze himself in the diner's bathroom. He'd used a bottle of antiseptic kept for burns and a sewing kit meant for tears in the vinyl seats. He didn't flinch now. "I'll buy a new shirt. How about you buy some professionalism?" Calvin leaned in. "Because if corporate sees you dragging your home life into this place one more time, you're gone. I'll make sure of it." Leo's eyes widened. His breathing went shallow the way it did when something scared him, but he didn't want anyone to notice. Ethan felt a familiar pressure in his chest, the one that used to rise right before a mission went sideways. Except this wasn't a battlefield. This was a diner in Oklahoma, a man in a cheap tie, and a kid watching his father get humiliated. Calvin straightened. "Get the kid out of sight, or I'm writing you up." He walked off, heels clicking like he was proud of himself. Ethan didn't move for a moment. He breathed, slow, controlled, the way they taught you when panic wasn't an option. Then he walked to Leo's booth. "You okay, bud?" Leo nodded, but the nod was the thin, wobbling kind that fooled no one. "Did I do something wrong?" he whispered. Ethan's throat tightened. No, not even a little. Leo tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I can wait in the storage room, he offered, where nobody sees. That hit Ethan harder than anything. Kids shouldn't volunteer to disappear. You're not hiding, Ethan said gently. You're not the problem. But he thinks I am. Ethan brushed a hand over his son's hair. Some people don't get what they're looking at. That's not on you. Leo slid out of the booth and hugged him around the waist. It was a tight, anxious squeeze, like a kid who wasn't sure if his world was safe anymore. Ethan looked down at him and felt that quiet, simmering anger, the kind that didn't explode. The kind that waited, gathered, measured. He used to be good at that kind of anger. Too good. When the dinner rush picked up, the pressure only got worse. Calvin hung around the kitchen like a storm cloud, scribbling on his clipboard and clearing his throat every time Leo stepped too close. Regulars sensed the tension. Even the friars hissed louder. Around 9, a group of local sheriff's deputies stopped in. Good guys, or mostly good. Deputy Ron Munley, the one with the swagger and the habit of judging people by their shoes, sauntered in first. His eyes flicked to Leo in the corner. Still letting your kid hang around here? He said loud enough for half the diner to hear. Place ain't exactly a safe playground. Ethan wiped his hands. He's fine. Hope so. Someone's gotta look after him. Munley smirked. A cook who works nights might not cut it. One of the deputies elbowed him. Come on, Ron. But Munley wasn't done. He leaned closer to the counter. You know, coal guys like you always give me a bad feeling. Something off. Like you're hiding something. Ethan didn't blink. He just cleaned the grill. Background on you's thin, Munley said. Real thin. People don't just pop up out of nowhere in their 30s. Ethan felt the world narrow. Munley wasn't the type to investigate anything serious, but he was the type to talk, to spread rumors, to get the wrong ears listening. Leo heard everything. He kept his eyes on his book, but Ethan saw his jaw clench. Munley leaned back. Anyway, keep the kid close. With that black SUV hanging around, who knows what kind of trouble rolls through here? Ethan froze. What SUV? Munley shrugged. Dark windows, no plates. Guys inside sure weren't locals. Saw it twice this week. Ethan's chest tightened. That confirmed it. He wasn't imagining things. Calvin overheard and swaggered back over. Did you say SUV? My staff didn't report anything? Cole Ethan didn't answer. Calvin tapped his clipboard like it proved something. If there's suspicious activity, I need documentation, reports, details. Instead, all I see is you letting your kid run around like this is a family picnic. Leo's head sank lower. Munley snorted. Hell, maybe the SUV's here for him. Ethan's vision went sharp around the edges. That old part of his brain, the part that measured exits, angles, threats, switched on automatically. Enough, he said quietly. But Calvin wasn't done posturing. This diner is a professional establishment, he barked, and having a child sleeping in a booth is not acceptable. You want this job, act like it matters. Ethan looked at Leo. The kid was trying so hard not to cry, trying to be brave, trying to be small. Something inside Ethan cracked, and not loudly. Quietly, decisively, like a safety lever being released. He walked around the counter and knelt beside his son. Hey, he whispered. You want to sit in the back with your book? Leo shook his head. I want to stay where you are. Ethan put a hand on his shoulder. Then stay. Calvin's voice boomed. I said get him out of sight. Ethan stood, slowly, and turned. "You don't raise your voice at my son." Calvin blinked. "Excuse me, you heard me. This is insubordination." Before he could finish, the front windows pulsed with bright white light. Headlights. Close. Too close. The entire diner fell silent. One of the deputies turned. "That's not a cruiser." Another muttered, "That's the SUV he was talking about." Ethan moved toward the window, but Munley beat him there. He peered through the blinds and swore under his breath. A black SUV with tinted windows idled directly outside, no license plates, engine running hot, and this time there wasn't one. There were three. They lined the curb in a clean row, blocking the exit, forming a barrier of polished steel and humming engines. Snow blew around them, illuminated in their headlights like swirling ghosts. Leo stepped closer to Ethan. "Dad," Ethan put a steady hand on his back. "It's all right," he murmured. But it wasn't. The pressure had built too long, too hard, too close. Someone inside one of the SUVs opened a door, just an inch, just enough for cold air to roll in and a dark shape to shift. Calvin stepped back from the window, face white. "What? What do they want?" Ethan didn't take his eyes off the glass. "They're not customers." "Should we call the sheriff, one?" Deputy asked. Munley swallowed. "They're already here." Leo tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Dad, I'm scared." And that those three words was the breaking point. The pressure that had been building through sleepless nights, suspicious stares, humiliating lectures, and creeping danger suddenly focused into something razor-sharp. Ethan lifted his son into his arms. "Stay close," he whispered. "Don't let go. Because whatever was coming now. And there was no more hiding." Snow blew sideways across the parking lot, slamming against the diner windows like a living thing. Inside, the air felt tight enough to snap. The three black SUVs remained motionless engines, humming their headlights, burning white tunnels into the storm. Ethan held Leo close, feeling the boy's heartbeat thudding against his chest. The deputies stood frozen. Calvin backed into the counter like it might swallow him whole. Customers whispered, prayed, hid behind napkin dispensers and laminated menus. But nobody moved toward the door. Nobody except Ethan. He lowered Leo gently to the floor behind the counter. "Stay right here, buddy." Leo clutched his coat sleeve. "Dad, don't go." Ethan knelt until their foreheads touched. "I'll come back. I promise you that." A promise. The same kind he'd once made to a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket, the promise that he would keep him safe no matter what it took, no matter who he had to be to do it. And he wasn't about to break it tonight. He stood jaw tight and took a single steadying breath. Then he walked toward the front doors. Deputy Munley hissed Cole. "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan didn't slow. "Keeping my son alive. That could be a hit squad out there, I know." When Ethan reached the glass, the light from outside cut hard angles across his face. The storm howled. The world waited. He pushed open the door. Cold ripped across his skin like a blade. Snow whipped in, stinging his eyes. The SUVs idled in front of him, lined up with mechanical precision. The driver's door of the middle vehicle opened. A man stepped out. Tall, armored coat gloves, clean haircut. Military posture. The kind that came from years of drills, not fashion. He didn't raise a gun. He didn't shout. He didn't even approach. He simply stared. Ethan recognized the stance instantly. Predator sizing up prey. Operator measuring a threat. Another man exited the second SUV. And a third. 3 men. 3 shapes in the snowstorm. moving with practiced synchronization that put every hair on Ethan's neck on edge. The lead man spoke, voice low and clipped. Ethan Cole. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Ethan narrowed his eyes. You don't need my name? We've been tracking you, the man said. You're coming with us. Ethan didn't move. Not happening. Step forward, the man ordered. Alone. Behind Ethan, through the glass, he could see Leo's small face peeking over the counter, wide, terrified. That alone was enough to anchor him in place. Tell me what you want, Ethan said. Then go. The man stepped deeper into the headlights. A witness. And the boy. Ice crawled through Ethan's veins. He didn't blink. That's not happening either. The man gave a small, professional nod. A signal. The two men flanking him reached into their coats, and the crisis snapped wide open. Ethan dove sideways just as the first weapon cleared its holster. A flash of muzzle fire sliced through the snow. He rolled across the icy pavement, the cold tearing through his jeans, and came up behind a concrete trash bin near the entrance. The diner exploded in screams. Deputies scrambled for cover. Somebody ducked under a booth. Glass shattered as a bullet hit the outer pane of the window. Ethan scanned fast 3 shooters, one-direction headlights blinding snow, limiting visibility. But he'd fought in worse places. Much worse. He darted around the trash bin, grabbed a handful of loose ice chunks, and hurled them at the nearest SUV headlights. 2 strikes. A crack. The beam flickered wildly, cutting their visibility. The second shooter advanced, confident, too confident. Another muzzle flash. Ethan slid low under it, using the snow as cover. He closed the distance faster than the shooter expected, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted hard, and drove an elbow into his jaw. The man spun sideways in the snow, disoriented, but the leader was already drawing a bead. Ethan saw the muzzle swing toward the diner door, toward his son, crouched inside. He didn't think. There was no time to think. He surged forward, scooped up the fallen shooter's weapon, and fired 2 rounds at the ground near the leader's feet, kicking up slush and gravel, forcing him to stumble back behind the SUV. Ethan grabbed the second shooter by the jacket collar, using the man's body as a shield, just as another shot cracked the air. The bullet hit the man's vest and dropped him limp in Ethan's grip. The leader shouted an order in a language Ethan recognized but hadn't heard in years, short efficient, the kind used by private contractors who didn't exist on paper. The third shooter flanked left. Ethan countered right. The man swung a baton. Ethan caught his wrist mid-strike, twisted until he felt the joints strain, and kicked his legs out from under him. The man landed in the snow with a sharp grunt. Ethan didn't relish any of it. He wasn't that man anymore. He didn't want to be. But Leo was inside that diner, and nothing else mattered. The leader circled the SUVs, moving with the discipline of someone who'd lived in firefights long enough to recognize the real threat standing in front of him. He held his gun in both hands now. No hesitation. No warning. Ethan dashed behind the far SUV boots, slipping breath burning in his lungs. Snow soaked his shirt, bit at his skin, blurred the lines of the world. He heard the leader's footsteps crunching closer, measured, deliberate. A glint of chrome caught his eye, the reflection of the leader's gun barrel sweeping the corner. Ethan slid across the snowbank just as the leader came around the bumper. He rammed his shoulder into the man's ribs, driving him hard against the SUV. The gun fell from his grip, skidding across the pavement. The leader retaliated with a knee to Ethan's stomach. Pain flared, but Ethan powered through. He grabbed the man by the collar, slammed him back again and again, feeling the resistance weaken. The man spat blood. You should have stayed off the grid, and you should have picked a quieter parking lot. Ethan delivered a final decisive blow, that sent the man collapsing into the snow. Silence fell heavy across the lot. The wind howled. The headlights sputtered. Snowflakes drifted lazily down, as if the world were exhaling. For a moment, Ethan just breathed slow, steady breaths that turned to steam in the cold night air. The deputies and customers stared through the diner windows like they were witnessing a ghost. Calvin's mouth hung open in disbelief. A waitress covered her heart, whispering something like a prayer. Inside, Leo pressed both palms to the glass, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Dad," he shouted, muffled by the window. Ethan's legs shook. Not from fear, not from cold, from the knowledge that he'd done exactly what he never wanted to do again. He'd crossed that line. He'd stepped back into the person he once was, the person he promised he'd never have to be. But he'd done it for Leo. Only for Leo. When he pushed open the diner door, warmth rushed over him, melting snow off his skin. Leo barreled into him so hard it knocked air from his lungs. Ethan wrapped him tight, burying his face in his son's hair. "I told you I'd come back," he whispered. Deputy Munley approached slowly, staring at Ethan like he was seeing him for the first time. "Cole, what in God's name was that?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The power dynamic had shifted. The room knew it. Munley knew it. Calvin definitely knew it. And somewhere outside in the half-dark of the storm, the fallen leader of the operation stirred, reaching for a radio clipped inside his coat. Ethan saw it. Just a faint movement. Just enough to tell him this wasn't over. Not even close. He tightened his hold on Leo. Big things were coming. Bigger than SUVs. Bigger than masked men. And this time, the past wasn't knocking politely. It was kicking the door in. The sheriff's sirens hit the highway before the blue and red lights appeared through the swirling snow. By the time the cruisers skidded into the diner lot, Ethan was already inside, sitting in a booth with Leo tucked against his side, wrapped in his coat like a small, trembling bird. The deputy's customers, and even Calvin, stood scattered around the room, whispering in pockets of stunned disbelief. Nobody had sat down. Nobody had touched their food. And nobody, not a single soul, had stopped glancing at Ethan like he'd just walked out of a movie they didn't know they were part of. Sheriff Hartley pushed through the door, brushing snow off his shoulders, his face creased with authority and suspicion. "Where are they?" he demanded. Deputy Munley pointed toward the parking lot. "3 down. One's definitely the leader." His voice wavered. "Cole handled them." Hartley turned. Handled Munley swallowed, nodding hard. "Sir, you need to see the footage." He gestured toward the security monitor behind the counter. The waitress had already rewound it. The moment Ethan stepped outside, the diner grew so silent, the hum of the soda machine sounded like a jet engine. Hartley leaned in. Everyone else did too. They watched snow blowing sideways, headlights burning, white dark shapes emerging. They watched Ethan move with a speed, precision, and awareness nobody working at the lantern had ever seen. They watched him anticipate every shot fight with calculated restraint, never waste a single motion. They watched him protect the diner, protect the people inside, protect Leo. When the footage ended, nobody spoke. Hartley turned slowly. "Cole, where'd you learn that Ethan didn't look away?" "Long time ago." "That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting." Hartley wasn't used to being stonewalled. He crossed his arms, staring Ethan down. "You realize you just took out 3 armed men with your bare hands and a snowbank?" Calvin blurted from across the room. "He almost killed them." Hartley shot him a look sharp enough to slice steel. "He also saved your life, Pierce. And your customers." So, how about you let the adults talk? Calvin's jaw snapped shut. A waitress murmured, I didn't even know people could move like that. Another whispered, he's not just the cook, is he? Hartley stepped closer to Ethan. Who are you? Leo looked up at his dad, fear returning to his eyes, as if the question itself was dangerous. Ethan rubbed his son's back. It's all right, buddy. Then he met the sheriff's gaze. Who I used to be doesn't matter. Hartley pointed toward the window. It matters to whoever sent those men. The room froze. The words hung heavy, thick with implication. Calvin swallowed. You brought this danger here? Ethan didn't raise his voice. No, these men weren't after me. Then who? Calvin demanded. A new voice answered from the doorway. Me. Everyone turned. The woman in the gray blazer, the one who'd stopped in earlier that night for coffee, walked back into the diner. Her campaign button had been removed. Her coat was dusted in snow, her hair slightly wind-blown from the storm. But she carried herself with the steady composure of someone who'd rehearsed standing in front of microphones her whole life. Elena Ward, candidate for Oklahoma Attorney General, former prosecutor, known for going after organized crime like it was a personal crusade. She stepped forward, eyes steady on Ethan. They weren't after your son, she said softly. They were after me. Gasps rippled through the room. Hartley exhaled sharply. Ma'am, you need to get back to your security detail. They're gone, she said. Cut off in the storm. And those men out there, they wanted to finish something they started years ago. Hartley blinked. What do you mean, years ago? Elena looked at Ethan. Tell them. Ethan stiffened. It's not their business. It became their business, she said quietly, the moment my past walked into your diner. The tension snapped tight again. Ethan looked at the sheriff, the deputies, the customers staring wide-eyed, the frightened kid at his side. He'd spent 8 years burying who he was. 8 years making sure Leo grew up without shadows crawling out of his father's past. 8 years keeping his head down, staying small, staying invisible. But the storm outside made one thing brutally clear. His past had finally found him, and hiding wasn't protecting Leo anymore. He let out a slow breath. I used to be Air Force pararescue, he said. Before that, other things. Classified work, the kind that didn't come with uniforms or medals. Munley's eyes widened. Special Ops Ethan didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. Elena stepped closer. And 10 years ago, on a night that still keeps me awake, he saved my life. The diner seemed to inhale all at once. Hartley looked between them. You two know each other? Elena nodded. He pulled me out of a safe house in Baja during a cartel raid. I was a federal witness preparing to testify. My protection detail was compromised. If he hadn't gotten to me when he did. Her voice thinned, but didn't break. I wouldn't be here tonight. The room went still. Ethan stared at the tabletop, jaw clenched. He had never expected to see her again. She had been just another soul needing a way out, another mission he'd carried through fire. He hadn't even known her name. Hartley turned slowly. Cole, you were in those covert rescue units. Does it matter? Ethan said. It does now, Elena replied. Because the same people who tried to kill me years ago have resurfaced. I've been investigating them again quietly. Too quietly, it turns out. They know I'm close to uncovering the political network protecting them. And they know you're the only reason their operation collapsed the first time. Calvin, pale as a sheet, whispered, So that hit squad was professional. Ethan nodded once. Munley backed up a step. So you're saying this whole thing is some kind of revenge plot? Revenge, Elena said, and prevention. If they kill me before the election, before my testimony, everything disappears. Hartley exhaled long. And why go after Ethan's kid? Elena's face darkened. To force him to hand me over. Gasps fluttered across the diner. Leo pressed closer to his dad, eyes huge and shining. Ethan wrapped an arm around him. They won't touch you again. Elena looked at them, father and son, her expression softening. I didn't know he had a child. I didn't know I was putting anyone else in danger. You didn't put him in danger, Ethan said. They did. But the storm outside slammed a reminder against the glass danger, didn't care whose fault it was. Elena turned to Hartley. Sheriff, I need full protection. Not just for me, for both of them. Calvin sputtered. Him, why him? Because she said, eyes locked on Ethan. He's the reason I survived once. And if he hadn't been here tonight, you'd all be dead. Calvin swallowed hard, guilt pooling across his face like oil. Munley looked down, shame flickering through him. The waitress spoke softly. Cole, we never knew. Ethan squeezed Leo's shoulder. I didn't want anyone to. Elena took a step closer. You can't stay here. They'll regroup. They'll come again with more men, better equipment. This isn't over. We're not running, Ethan said. I'm not asking you to run. She met his eyes. I'm asking you to help finish what neither of us got to finish last time. Silence fell. Heavy. Excruciating. Ethan felt the weight of the diner's stares, fear, awe, surprise, regret. Calvin cleared his throat. I shouldn't have spoken to you the way I did. Ethan didn't answer. Munley stepped up next. Cole, if you're who she says you are, I owe you an apology too. Ethan didn't answer him either. Only one apology mattered, and it wasn't theirs. He looked down at Leo. The kid's voice was a whisper. Dad, do we have to leave? Ethan brushed a thumb along his cheek. For a while, just until the danger's done. Will you stop them? Ethan swallowed. I'll try. Elena watched the exchange with something close to reverence. You don't have to do this alone. Hartley stepped in. We'll coordinate federal support. We'll get safe housing. But you're right, those men out there aren't small time. It'll take more than standard police work. Calvin rubbed the back of his neck. If you stay with the sheriff, what about the diner? Ethan gave him a look that shut him up instantly. Elena stepped forward. I'm offering you something, she said. Not charity. Not a favor. The room tensed. A position on my protective detail. Temporary but full authority. You'll have resources clearance and the ability to end this threat at the source. Hartley didn't object. If anything, he looked relieved. Munley murmured, He's more qualified than half the feds I've worked with. Ethan didn't look at them. He looked at Leo, the only part of his life that ever truly mattered. Leo's small voice broke the silence. Dad, if you help her, does that mean they stop coming for us? Ethan's heart constricted. Yes, he said. Then, do it. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, gathering himself. Then he looked at Elena Ward, at the sheriff, at the room full of people who had spent hours pretending he didn't exist, and were now staring at him like he was the only thing standing between them and the dark. I'll help, he said, but on one condition. Elena nodded. Name it. Leo comes first, always. A soft, relieved smile crossed her face. Agreed. Hartley exhaled. Then we move now, before those men wake up or someone worse shows up. As the sheriff's deputies scrambled into motion, as the storm beat harder against the windows, as the weight of a new path settled on Ethan's shoulders, Calvin muttered under his breath. I had no idea who he really was. The waitress whispered back. None of us did. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't correct anyone. Because tonight, the truth had stepped into the light. And there was no going back. Snow was still drifting across the highway when Sheriff Hartley escorted Ethan, Leo, and Elena out the back door of the diner. The parking lot was a flurry of squad cars, camera flashes from deputies documenting the scene, and paramedics treating the dazed attackers who were now cuffed and shivering in the snow. Ethan kept Leo close, one hand on the boy's back. For the first time that night, people moved aside when he walked past, not out of fear, but out of respect. Deputies nodded to him, quiet thank yous in their eyes. Even Munley, who'd spent weeks side-eyeing him, stepped forward with an awkward sort of reverence. Cole, I misjudged you, he said. I won't make that mistake again. Calvin Pierce didn't come outside at all. He was sitting inside the diner, pale and small, giving a statement with trembling hands. From what the sheriff hinted, corporate was already on him for how he'd handled things. The man who liked barking orders had lost his voice, but Ethan barely cared about any of that. All he cared about was the small hand still wrapped around his own. That night at the sheriff's substation, things shifted fast. Federal agents arrived within an hour. Elena met with them behind closed doors. They spoke in clipped, sharp tones, names being exchanged, files laid on tables, the kind of conversations that meant the next moves were already in motion. When she came out, she walked straight to Ethan. They're taking this seriously now, she said. And they want you on the protective detail, not just for me, but for the full operation. Ethan's first instinct was to refuse. He wasn't that man anymore. He wasn't the shadow who ran toward gunfire. He wasn't the medic hauling broken bodies out of the dark. He wasn't the quiet ghost inside a uniform nobody admitted existed. But Leo tugged his sleeve. Dad, if you help them, the bad guys stop coming for us, right? The look in Ethan's son's eyes cut through every doubt, every hesitation, every fear of becoming what he once was. Leo needed safety, stability, a future not shaped by running. And this was a way to end the threat, not feed it. Ethan nodded. I'll help. But when it's done, I go back to being Leo's dad. That's the job that matters. Elena smiled softly. That's the job that saved my life. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something settle inside him. Not the adrenaline, not the fear. Something quieter, something steadier. Purpose. 3 months later, winter had melted out of Oklahoma, and life looked nothing like it had the night the SUVs blocked the diner. Ethan and Leo now lived in a modest townhouse near the federal building, secure, quiet, clean, and most importantly, safe. The walls weren't thin, the heat didn't sputter, and Leo had a room with a real desk where he worked on school projects and drew pictures of helicopters he insisted were not military, just cool. The protective operation that once chased Elena Ward now answered to her. The investigation she'd started ended with multiple indictments, a criminal network exposed, and a few powerful names dragged into the light. She became Attorney General in a landslide election, though she still dropped by the townhouse now and then with takeout or a stack of case files she wanted Ethan's opinion on. Ethan didn't become a federal agent or return to special operations. He didn't want a title. He didn't need one. Instead, he accepted a quieter role. A strategic advisor, someone who could look at a map or a threat assessment and see the hidden angles no one else saw. It paid well, but more importantly, it let him walk Leo to school every morning, make him pancakes every Saturday, and read him to sleep every night. The diner. The lantern reopened after repairs. And when Ethan brought Leo in for burgers one warm evening, people treated him differently. They didn't stare. They didn't whisper. They simply nodded, waved, or refilled his coffee as if gratitude was something that didn't require a lot of noise. Munley stopped by the table and cleared his throat. "Damn good to see you, Cole." Calvin Pierce wasn't there. Corporate had let him go. Some things worked out how they needed to. Elena joined Ethan and Leo that evening, slipping into the booth with her sleeves rolled up and an expression not of a politician, but of someone who'd finally stopped running. She brought Leo a set of miniature courtroom figurines as a joke, little judges and lawyers and jurors, and he arranged them on the table like superheroes. Ethan watched him, then looked at Elena. She raised her eyebrows. What she asked. "You're good with him," Ethan said. She looked down, her expression softening. "He reminds me that the world still has good in it. He's the reason I fought the way I did." "I know," she said. "And one day he will too." They didn't say anything else for a long moment. They didn't need to. Leo lifted one of the figurines. "Dad, look. This one has a tiny briefcase." Ethan laughed. "That's how you know they're important." The three of them sat together, the sun dipping low through the diner windows, warm light glowing against the chrome and vinyl. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't the stuff of headlines. But it was peaceful. And peace had been a long time coming. Life doesn't always give you second chances. Sometimes it gives you a storm, a diner, 3 black SUVs, and a choice you never wanted to make. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it gives you a reason worth fighting for. Ethan didn't get his old life back. He got something better. A future his son could grow up in. A purpose that didn't come with shadows. And a small circle of people who saw him not the uniform he used to wear, not the secrets he once buried, but the man he chose to be. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. Because sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is step out of the dark, not to fight a war, but to protect the piece of the world that finally feels like home.